I'm conflating weak democracy with Republican-led, which I'm sure you all kind of agree on that. So that's why this work is particularly important. It gets wrapped up in the work we do, you know, strengthening democracy. And then the other thing that some people don't instantly recognize as being part of climate action is racial justice in particular, and why that's part of climate action, and, you know, having a mindset of keeping justice at the center and being sort of restorative in the way that we approach our solutions is important to addressing the problem. So that's kind of our mindset. If it's okay with you, I do find that like looking at screen shares diminishes the feeling of being in the room with people. But I just thought I kind of want to do screen shares and then kind of flicker in and out of, it might be annoying, tell me if it's annoying, but I want to intermittently share some screens, which I think will be, whoops, except it's not loading. Why are you not loading? Okay. So just as background, a little bit of background to, hang on, my computer is crashing. Okay, maybe I won't screen share because my computer is deciding that this is not something that is worthwhile. So we're recently kind of thinking about where our, we used to really emphasize building in the context of those policies, and we've kind of, can you guys hear me? Because my,
yeah, you're breaking up just a little bit.
I think the problem is a lot of people aren't muted and it keeps cutting into other people's lives. So if everyone could mute themselves, we could probably hear you better.
okay, I seem to be moving on the screen.
There you go.
All right, sorry about that. So the concrete justice of how, a concrete example of how social justice would be recognized in climate change work would be working policies that work first to clean up the most heavily impacted areas. So and I can go into a little bit more detail about that later, but when you think about reducing emissions, the thing that is really exciting about that work, in addition to fending off climate change, is reducing particulate and other toxic emissions that heavily impact our health, all of our health. You probably know maybe that about 3,000 people in the Bay Area die each year from the impacts of particulate matter pollution, which is the smallest kinds of things that can float in the air and they embed deep in the lungs. And so when we clean up the air, we improve the health outcomes for the whole region. And when we target those activities and those policies into the more heavily impacted areas, then that is kind of a restorative justice kind of point of view. So anyway, so getting a little bit off track. I think that the commonality that the 350 Bay Area people who work so hard for these policies really is they are showing up for justice, because climate change is going to make it's going to magnify the accumulation of past injustices, and it's just like a big snowball rolling downhill. So we show up for justice in this organization, and we are working to mobilize more and more people to foster action, specifically by activating civic engagement, just like the Indivisibles, and building relationships with the people that are decision makers. So that is basically why we show up. And our focus, I think I'm not going to share my screen because my computer is being flaky, which is a problem. But our focus is on eliminating emissions from transportation, energy generation, and in buildings. And that's what, so that still covers a whole lot of territory, but we try to keep our focus on those areas in particular while keeping people and justice in the center. So one of the things that we're able to do, given our structure, let me see if there's any way I can get this to share. Okay, I'm just going to share for a minute. See if this will work. No, that didn't work. Can you see the screen, or did I black out? My first.
No, I'm not seeing it right now.
It's blacked out, Laura.
Yeah.
Laura, now you're frozen.
Yeah, looks, I'm not getting a video feed from you either right now, Laura.
Can I suggest, Laura, that you go off and come back on? Maybe that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I think so. Looks like it. We're experiencing technical difficulties, and please be patient. Hopefully Laura will be back with us in just a moment. And while we're waiting, I just want to give a shout out to Susan and the Events and Actions team for doing their first in-person tabling since the pandemic started. So Susan, thank you so much for putting that together.
Yes, and it was very rewarding. And
Yeah,
actually, if I can take 2 seconds and just say, if anyone is interested in coming on board to their Events and Action group, we could use more hands as now the COVID crisis is waning, hopefully, and we can be out tabling. Thank you.
And do you want to say a little bit about what it was you did this last weekend?
Well, we focused on the voting rights problems specifically, and using that, we made some posters. She's coming back, so I'll get off. Talk later.
Okay.
Well, my computer crashed, so that was exciting. I think I had one too many things open. I think I need a new computer as well. Okay, so we're lucky at 350 Bay Area that we have local groups in most of the counties in the Bay Area. So we have 6 local groups that develop relationships with the, with their elected officials directly. So we have 350 Bay Area, which is our policy-driven education nonprofit. And then we have 350 Bay Area Action, which is our 501c3, which gives us the opportunity to do more direct lobbying. And that is the arm that that decides on the slate of bills that we follow. And I'll put the link to that document. I had it all nicely in my PowerPoint, but it's not going to happen. So we have a slate of about 21 bills that we follow, which is an incredibly ambitious campaign for a small group of volunteers. So hang on one sec. So when we work on our local groups, we are trying to get a slate of actions passed in each city council and county level, which is basically the passing the climate emergency resolutions, the all electric ordinances. I think you all are aware that we've been successful with some of that in this county. New gas station bans. We work with the Congas group that was started in Sonoma County. Fossil-free government operations. we're trying to figure out ways to slash the carbon miles traveled that are under the control of the cities and counties, facilitate local clean energy, and decarbonize existing buildings. So that's the agenda. The 350 Bay Area is building a tool set around to help local advocates get those kinds of ordinances passed at the city and county level. Our theory, well, this may sound very silly, but we were going through talking about some of these issues about where we needed to build more presence, more hub groups by city. And we quickly realized, which we hadn't really put together before, that the areas where we had city level attention based on climate issues and the climate agenda, it sounds obvious, but they were the ones that had a climate agenda and were taking action. And the cities where we didn't have a group of constituents really organized around that, they weren't passing a climate agenda. So we're trying now to very intentionally build out across the Bay Area these city level hubs and get people oriented with tools and support so that they can develop those relationships with their city councils and county boards, where they can keep pushing things through kind of a climate pipeline and give them the idea of what kinds of actions they can take. And it developed that ongoing dialogue. So for example, here in Santa Rosa, we literally were sitting down with one of the city councilors, and she said, what are the next 3 things? I always want to know what we're going to be working on next. So part of our, that's just one reason, as you know, why advocates are so important, because the people that we elect are busy on so many different things. They don't necessarily know even how to start taking action on climate in an affordable way at the city level. So we're building out those tools, and they will be shareable with everybody, and just trying to get everything in one place for that work. And then as we build people's capacities at the local level, we will also then try to engage them at the state and potentially federal level. So it really is putting a lot more of an intentional effort in getting people into the process, trained up, understanding how to build these relationships at all the different levels and what the basic talking points are and the roadmaps for these kinds of actions. So when everybody else is talking, I'll put the link in so you can track our state level action. So 350 Bay Area Action, our grassroots lobbying arm, they get very busy during the legislative season. That group has grown profoundly over the last couple of years. Christine Hooks, who's on this call, is really part of that committee and instrumental to linking the Sonoma County folks to the state level action and getting these meetings with the people we elect in place and stuff like that. So probably don't want to talk about those. We've just now moved into thinking about federal legislation. And the reasons that we're doing that are to, again, build these relationships. And part of the reason that this little local group, relatively little in the scheme of things, is getting involved in federal legislation is to develop those relationships with our representatives in Congress and have a conversation with them that is not just about the federal level. So go to them and let them know what's going on climate in California, because they don't know. They don't know really what's going on here. And help them see how that informs the work that they're doing at the federal level, and then also ask for their support for the state level actions where that's appropriate. So then that immediately phased into, well, then what other federal legislation can we be, once we have these relationships, then we can advocate for specific bills. So in California, there are about 2,000 to 2,800 bills per session. And then that's just ever that many more at the federal level. So we probably are never going to have any kind of an organization that can go bill by bill. So the way that we've chosen to work, I have a really great slide about this, by the way, but the way we've chosen to work on the federal level is in coalition. And I think, let me know maybe by doing like a raised hand kind of a thing. The networks we deal with are the Green New Deal network. Do you know that about, I know everybody knows about the Green New Deal. Does everybody know about the Green New Deal network? Doesn't look like they do. Okay. Just trying to see where we are. So one of the things that they have done is come up with the Thrive agenda. And everything crashed. So this is kind of a bummer. So after the pandemic hit, the Green New Deal has really morphed into something that is really focused on rebuilding, recovery, building back better, these kinds of things. So like I said, once I stop talking, I'll put links to all of these things in. So we happen to be working with the Green New Deal network on the Thrive agenda, which looks like the Green New Deal, right? And then there's Build Back Fossil Free, which is another coalition. Has anybody heard of that one? No. And then there's a really interesting group called the Climate Crisis Policy Coalition, and they're working on the Earth Bill, which is 100% renewable energy by 2030. So requiring renewable electricity by utilities, 100% clean by 2030, 100% electric vehicles by car manufacturers, and then there's a regenerative agriculture component. So one of our roles, even though we are a very small player, a couple of things that we can bring to the table is keeping climate and clean energy at the center of these bills, and justice components as well, because they sort of morph into being just about jobs, and some of the climate centric stuff falls off the table and some of the justice stuff falls on the table, and we're there to keep bringing that to the table. And we do that in coalition really with other 350 local groups throughout the country. We're working in a concerted way to do that. So that is how we're approaching the federal legislation. We're definitely new to it. We haven't been doing this very long, and we don't have the capacity to, go bill by bill and figure it out. But we are kind of meant to be like, just providing bumpers to the conversation that says, don't stray too far away from making sure that we are creating a lot of clean energy jobs, and making sure that part of the conversation is ramping down fossil fuel energy while ramping up clean energy. So I'm sorry that was a little bit of a messy presentation. I lost my computer, just completely crashed. And I saw that there were a bunch of questions. Tom, do you want to just ask me the questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions, I think Christine started to answer it, was what Sonoma County cities have hub groups that are building relationships and are advocating with city council.
Oh, good. So Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, Petaluma primarily, others to a little bit of a lesser extent, but the 350 Sonoma Steering Committee decided that we would work with Rohnert Park and Cotati, with our existing members that happen to live there, and help them build that capacity. And this is the thing that is really amazing, which you as Indivisible organizers know, is that a core group of 5 or 6 people can make a huge difference relatively quickly by networking with the other groups that they probably already belong to. So we feel pretty strongly that that's going to, be something that we 350 Sonoma can help facilitate pretty readily. And then we're doing that with all of the local groups across the region.
So, and I have a follow-on question, I think based on what you just said as well, which is when we're working at the federal level, right? And we've got a team that goes and talks with Senator Feinstein's staff about every 6 weeks or so. But, she's one of 2 senators for what, 37 million people, something like that. So, we're a pretty small group and it's hard to get her attention. I think we do a reasonably good job for a tiny group. And there are ways to network with a lot of people and get something moved. But I'm assuming that the further down the chain you go, and you get to the city council level or the county level, that you don't need as many people to get somebody's attention. Is that true? And how does that play out in the work that you do?
Wait, Tom, you'd think I paid you to ask that question. So I have this saying, 6 people, 9 months. And it's my favorite saying. And I saw it here in Santa Rosa. It was 6 people really dedicated to doing exactly this. And we met not quite weekly, but about weekly. And we developed a plan and we just started getting on their agendas. And we had very, very specific asks. So, yep, 6 people. But we also were people that were linked into the activist community, honestly. So when you have the 6 people developing the relationships and the talking points and the specific asks, then we could call on all of our groups that we work with pretty closely to show up at meetings or send emails and stuff like that. So.
Right. Yeah. We had a question. Do you collaborate at all with Food and Water Watch, especially on legislation analysis and amplification?
At the federal level, absolutely. I think they show up in at least a couple of these coalitions that we're part of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Great.
It's all the big. It's funny because the names are in all the same names seem to show up in these different coalitions.
Yeah. And Jane Bender asks if you're working with the Climate Center as well.
On federal legislation, no.
I think she probably means state, but it doesn't specify.
Muting.
We do.
Muting. It's state, Laura. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Jane. We do a lot. So on clean energy work, we tend to overlap a lot with Woody, but increasingly more and more of the players because we're all working on at the CPUC and such. So yeah, we overlap a lot, but not in every single area we're working in. And then, we're trying to figure out how to resolve some issues and working on signing on to Climate Safe California, because our ledge team was reluctant, thinking that they were signing on to specific legislation. So we're still
no, it's not.
I know. Ledge committees, it's such complicated work. We operate in 3 different broad areas and have different coalitions for each of the areas. So they just get very nervous about, ending up on the wrong side of a legislative effort or a coalition. So sometimes we won't take a position because we don't want to make one of our key allies angry.
Okay, well, we're pushing to get, this local bodies to endorse Climate Safe California, the general principles of it. So,
yep. So we just talked about this at our policy team meeting. And so the 350 Bay Area side is going to try to work again with the 350 Bay Area action side so that we can sign on, but don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody. Okay.
Don't tell anybody.
But as we talk, with Indivisible, we're going to be looking at that too. So it was just really nice to hear we're all doing the same thing. It's the
same agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah. The Climate Safe California, I think, does a pretty good job. It's not 100% overlap because we just have slightly different focus in some ways, but in terms of the broad principles, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're all working to the same goal.
Well, not only that, but I think it's time, even though we probably won't meet the 2030 goal, we certainly won't if we don't put it on the table. So we are a huge proponent throughout the organization of setting aggressive goals and pushing for those and framing our work around that, because I think it gets people's attention. It wasn't that long ago that getting to the moon was impossible. So I think that we just have to take impossible out of our vocabulary and just keep swatting this.
Pushing hard. Yeah.
So Laura, I've got another question, and please, folks, put your questions in the chat, and we'll ask them that way. You had mentioned the Green New Deal Network and the Thrive Agenda, and Indivisible also at the national level has been pushing the Thrive Agenda very strongly.
Oh, good. Yay.
Yeah. And at the same time, I think they're trying to push that kind of into the American Jobs Plan work
Right.
that Biden's doing, right? So he's got 2 infrastructure plans, one around climate and jobs, and the other is around kind of the human side of care providers, and that reframing infrastructure is not just about roads and bridges and things like that, but also about childcare and care providers, and the human piece that allows people to actually go places and do work as well. David Roberts, who writes a lot about climate, recently said that the American Jobs Plan is a climate plan, and then it's also a jobs plan, and then it's also an infrastructure plan. So depending on where you stand and look at it, it can be seen in a lot of different lights. But I guess my question on the jobs plan is, what's the strategy there? Is it to bump it up a couple of levels? Is it to just keep it from degrading, as you were saying, and becoming too much on jobs and not enough on climate? Or how do you think about that?
The whole jobs plan?
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of different things. I think maybe I'm straying a little bit out of jobs, but I think if there are plentiful, well-paying jobs that are hopefully unionized, then we have an easier time getting the unions to stop fighting us at every turn. So now you're straying into the social security network, that if not having a union job means that you're arm wrestling somebody for a $7.50 hourly rate job, of course you want to just everything to stay the same, and you view everything as a threat. Or if you're over 50 and you've spent your entire career in a particular area, that this whole retraining thing is a pretty dicey proposition for you. So I think if we can focus our entire economy and system on taking care of people first and not profits first. So now I've gotten very in the clouds, but that's how I think about the Jobs Act. It's not just spending money to generically create jobs, being very intentional about making sure that those jobs pay a livable wage and that there's security in those jobs one way or another. So I've become a socialist, full-throated. I mean, it just doesn't make sense for our entire economy to be lined up to enrich, the top 637 families. It's just time for us to rethink that. And I think that's what Biden's trying to do. So.
Right. Yeah.
But they also have to be clean energy jobs. I mean, we can't buy coal jobs by, another form of socialism, which is supporting the coal industry when it's just not in anybody's interest. So.
And from that perspective, how do you think the plan as it's currently put together stacks up? Does it seem pretty robust to you? Does it need work?
No, it always could be better. Always could be better. Yeah. It's no, I mean, I think it's it's big, and that's good, and it's a start. And I think once we get on that path, I think that we can get to where it really does need to be. And the fact that it's big is encouraging, because I think Obama didn't go big enough, and it was a huge problem. So if it's big and it's effective and it dumps a lot of money into the economy and into people's pockets, then we have a chance to keep going with it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's because, we always struggle when we're calling our senators or our congressmen, struggle a little bit with, do we push them to take this thing? It's got a clean energy standard, right? Keep the clean energy standard, which we'd never had before. push this thing through and get it done. Don't tell me you're going to get it done in September or something. Push it hard now. Don't compromise a lot on it. Don't waste your time, trying to get Republican pretend votes that are going to go away when the vote happens, that kind of thing. Do we take that and say, run with this really hard right now? Or do we say, you know what, this needs work before you try to push it through because it's really not good enough?
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like with this, that pushing hard and getting it done, and then, doing another piece on top of it is probably a better.
Look, I think that it's better than anything we anticipated seeing.
Right.
So the thing about the clean energy standard is we do have to make sure that it doesn't include fossil fuels, which sounds so obvious, but carbon capture and storage, that should not be part of clean energy. Like, we may want to do that, but it shouldn't be part of something that's called the Clean Energy Plan. Anyway, yes, there's a whole lot of stuff that's at the edges, but if we can get it on the board, we can fine tune it later, and we can, direct their attention to, the fact that some of this stuff is imaginary clean energy and just as dirty as past energy.
Yeah.
So I think we may have gotten natural gas as a bridge fuel off the table. That's huge, guys. Yeah. So no, we're making progress. My concern is we have such a tiny little period of time right now that, like I said, I think we just need to get this stuff on the table and the spending starting to happen and the jobs starting to flow, and then we will have an opportunity to get more. But maybe that's too realpolitik. We just have to keep going and do the best we can, and then keep pushing them. I think we have suffered, progressives in particular, or maybe Democrats in particular, we have suffered from the notion that there is a point where we're done. Like, oh, we elect a president. Oh, good. Now we can ignore it for a couple of years. And that really was at our peril. I mean, we just dropped the ball.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be done protecting the democracy or getting climate addressed. It's just what we're going to have to do going forward.
And I think what I would add to that is, and it's usually us that have to push it hardest. We do have some leaders who are out in front, but most of them aren't most of the time. Most of them are listening instead of leading. And so it really is our showing up, whether it's in a city council meeting or, talking to the staff of a senator, that makes the difference.
Well, I'm putting my 350 Bay Area Action hat on. You can see I'm also the executive director of 350 Bay Area Action. We have an electoral committee for that reason. Like, until people lose because they aren't doing enough on climate, we just have a shakier story to tell.
Yeah. So what are the one or two things that you would want people who are in the meeting tonight to get started on right away? What are the action steps that they should take?
Well, I guess I'm a firm believer, because I am 350 Bay Area. So my preferred entry point for this work really is the state level bills and developing relationships around that. And then making sure that when you're, that you use that knowledge and build that knowledge, that when you're meeting with Congress people and senators, you have an awareness of what's, you can bring that awareness to those meetings about what's going on in California and how, that's our agenda. So I guess that's my preference, which is to say, include climate in those conversations. If you're getting meetings every 6 weeks with Feinstein's office, you're keeping it on the agenda. And you don't have to meet with Diane to be on the agenda. The staff is what is helping, shape what she's working on. And that's awesome. We don't have meetings every 6 weeks with Diane, but we've had a hard time. I don't think Feinstein's ever meet with Bay Area again.
Well, and I don't know if I told you this, but the last time you came and spoke with us, it was literally like 4 days after the filmed encounter with a senator at her office that had gone viral and articles had been written about it. And you came and talked to us. And the very next day we met with Jim Lazarus, who was the chief of staff who invited the kids upstairs to meet the senator. And we had a moderately contentious meeting with him the next day, as he was, which she would be wont to do, to try to downplay, her interaction with them. And so it was an interesting time, but we've continued to push for climate with her for a long time now, actually. It's hard to say if it's getting much better on her end, but I think with, she's not the one who's going to push the boundaries on that.
But if all they hear from are the people that are paid to lobby, then, it does skew they think of that as citizen input, which is ridiculous. So we just have to keep showing up.
Yeah.
So Youth versus Apocalypse spun off as its own organization, which I think was a great victory for everybody. I mean, super exciting. We support them however we can. But then we decided that, we missed having that kind of energy. So we have a new youth-led mobilizing team.
Oh, fantastic.
So the people that are developing our direct action responses to things are high schoolers and college students and young adults. And then they're actually, from that standpoint, then working their way into the rest of the organization. So bringing a whole lot of energy and life. Not that we were, not energetic before, but it is a lot more fun. So it's a really exciting part of what we're doing.
Yeah. Fantastic. I want to open the floor to folks. We've got, I think, 20 on the call. If you want to unmute yourself, and if you have a question for Laura, just go ahead and unmute yourself, and we can have a bit of a conversation.
Do you need the links to the Build Back Fossil Free or the climate crisis policy?
If you want,
I can send them to you, Tom. I can't really get them.
Yep.
Yeah.
That would be great. Yeah, so let me, while we're waiting for people to think of the questions they have, let me mention with Feinstein, I'm not sure how much of our membership knows about this, and Laura, I doubt that you were aware of it, but we saw an example of a really effective statewide action with Feinstein about a couple of weeks ago, although it unfolded over the course of probably a month or so. Susan Morgan, who leads Indivisible Marin, was the key driver of this. And what she did was she put together a group letter from indivisibles all over California, and very carefully got input, but crafted a really well-written, very strong letter, basically asking the senator to drop her opposition to the filibuster in order to be able to pass the voting rights legislation. And what Susan did was she asked different chapters, ourselves included, to sign on to the letter and say how many people were in a part of their organization. So for us, it's pushing 2,000 people. But by doing that, she was able to get together a letter that said that it was a letter on behalf of people who represented 70 to 90,000 activists in the state of California. And then she set up a press conference for it. She got a lawyer from Berkeley, an activist from Indivisible San Francisco, and I think somebody else for the press conference. Got the Chronicle looped in. So there was an article, I think the day before the press conference, or it was the day of. And then they had a demonstration out in front of Feinstein's office. Jim came down and met with them. And they got him on tape saying that she would be willing to reform the filibuster if it stood in the way of legislation, which was a step further than she had taken. I don't know whether he, got reprimanded for taking that step, but that got pressed too. I mean, it got picked up by the LA Times and the Chronicle. So it was a great example, I think, of what can happen when you really network a bunch of groups and come up with, a particular strategy of action. Because up until that point, she had always either directly opposed doing anything about the filibuster or had been hedging her bet. So
That's a huge victory.
Yeah, it was enormous. Yeah,
That is
even
awesome.
if you were to try to backtrack or something. And somebody's saying also it got picked up in Kansas City a week later. So right now we're at a point where I think with that and with other efforts, it's a constant kind of pushing and pushing and pushing to see if you can get, you know, the rest of the dominoes to fall, right?
Well, not only that, but you let them know that the indivisibles represent a really large number of people. And I don't know that we have been good about, you know, we're good about saying, here, sign on, you know, to groups, but we're not asking the groups to tell us how many people they represent.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, I think that did make a difference in terms of how they heard the message. Although they've been meeting with different indivisible chapters for some time, but I think in terms of how they heard the message and how they felt kind of obligated to respond to it. And then again, if it had just been a letter and not a press conference, and you know, if they hadn't gotten the press involved, it wouldn't have been as effective either. So doing all those things together, I think, was what made the difference. And I want to extend an invitation to you and other 350 Bay Area or Bay Area Action members to join us at any of our Member of Congress meetings. We would be happy to have you there. As
Oh, we would love that. That would be terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, you could probably help us with the piece that you were just mentioning of bringing knowledge of state legislative issues. We've got those on the table because I think you're right. I mean, there are a variety of ways in which, you know, Senator Padilla or Senator Feinstein, for example, might direct federal funding in ways that would help climate efforts in California or push the governor to do better than he's doing right now.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that those could be really super interesting conversations to see how those efforts dovetail together, because California is a leader, a world leader in climate action. In most areas, we're getting our butts kicked by some states, which is fabulous news.
Like Washington,
yeah. But we're also the 5th largest economy in the world. So, yeah, I mean, I think that we can think about that power very explicitly when it comes to climate action.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll make sure that I get invitations to you for our upcoming Member of Congress meetings. We would love to have you or other members of the organization join us and provide some expertise.
Yeah, I'll make sure that I think you should probably talk to our federal ledge team as well.
Yeah.
And get you roped in that way so that we can, if we can stay in sync, it just, when you have people showing up that represents, you know, tens of thousands of constituents, then you do tend to get a better, a different point of view of people listening to what you have to say.
Yeah. And another thing that we've done recently was thanks to Steve Hogle, who I think is still on the call, who put together a meeting with Representative Huffman that was with all the indivisibles north of the Golden Gate Bridge, basically. So we kind of networked everybody together. And I don't know if you're aware of this, Huffman actually has a bill to electrify the entire US Postal Fleet.
Yeah,
which
good.
would be pretty exciting. He mentioned on the call that it's the largest vehicle fleet in the world, which I had no idea. But
well, you would think that would flow from legislation that's already been passed, you know, to electrify the government fleet. But I guess they think of the postal service as different.
Well, and DeJoy is still running
Yeah.
It's a race against time to get him out and you know, make sure that he doesn't sign contracts that they can't get out of, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I know. It's really frustrating that we can't take action faster in that area, but works to our favor once we right that ship. So
yes.
Frustrating.
And Jed says we need to push Newsom hard as he keeps backtracking and
yes,
kind of ceding leadership position to Washington State.
Yeah. In fact, you know, so that's a really interesting comment, because in so many of these areas, it always comes back to Newsom. So when we're talking about the Air Resources Board, the CPUC, where we don't have elected commissioners, the only way to get leverage is through Newsom. at the CPC, because the commissioners aren't elected, so they don't really care what we think. I don't know, we keep coming back to Newsom over and over again for different kinds of activities. So.
Yeah. And is the recall effort going to make that a lot harder to do this year? Is he going to be way more conservative than he might have been otherwise?
Distracted, yeah. I don't know. We haven't figured that out yet. I mean, I haven't figured that out yet. Yes, we assume that he has his attention more on that than anything else. On the other hand, the activist energy in the state is around these kinds of issues. And we have been his supporters because of those actions, and he knows that. So, yeah. I mean, he's not my favorite governor.
Yeah.
But
we also have a comment that he's still trying to ship Northern California water to Southern California.
Yeah, no, I don't, he clearly is cozy with some of the very interests that we are trying to push back on. So it is depressing. But
And
he needs us.
Yes.
He needs us. He needs our energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a call or a particular action that is top of mind for you right now, either a piece of legislation that you really want to see passed, or anybody who needs to be contacted this week that you would like people to reach out to?
Let me we are following so many bills. Like even when I was trying to put the list together, the list was a week old, and some of them had been pulled and some of them have been turned into 2-year bills. So let me check in with the ledge team and see, and I'll send you an email with that, and then with the links to Build Back Fossil Free and the Earth Bill.
Great.
Which I think dovetail nicely with the Thrive agenda. Perfect.
Yeah, and we're going to send out an email after this meeting, and we'll include that information so that when you get it, you can pick up your phone, or you can use ResistBot if you want, and send an email to whichever elected official you want to reach out to. I think ResistBot these days will do, I don't know about, I think city and state as well as federal. So that's kind of handy as well.
Yeah. And then in Santa Rosa, for Santa Rosa residents, there's a big climate action subcommittee meeting on Wednesday when they're going to be talking about the gas station ban. So if you're a local resident.
It's at 4.
Pardon?
It's at 4 o'clock.
Did I say that? Yeah, it's at 4.
Yeah, that's why I added it, because you said it was Wednesday, but I threw in the time.
Yes, it's Wednesday at 4, and we're really trying to get just everybody to show up to get them to consider putting it on the agenda and recommending.
Jane and Laura, would you put that contact for that Zoom call on your info to Tom?
Yes. Yeah. Jane. Woody was one of the people who started Congas with Jenny, and man, they've just done such a great job. It's so exciting. And then that got picked up by one of our young mobilizing team members who is leading the fight in Nevada to keep Costco from building their big gas station. So hats off to those two incredible activists. So it's exciting.
It's kind of interesting to me that people are still building gas stations, I have to say, because I would think that you'd have to show a plan for how that's going to play out over, a business plan that would say it's going to be highly profitable for 5 years or 10 years or something like that. And with even with what we've seen so far in terms of legislation, the writing's kind of on the wall. I mean, it strikes me that, everybody's talked about range anxiety with electric vehicles, and, aren't you worried about, are you going to be able to refuel, which frankly isn't, in my experience, isn't that big a deal. But nobody's talking about range anxiety with gas powered vehicles, because at some point it's going to tip, right? People are going to be buying more electric vehicles. It's going to be harder to sell. an internal combustion engine car because people aren't going to want them. The resale value is going to go down. But at some point, it's going to get harder to refuel, because you need a certain volume of cars to be able to sustain that business. I mean, those are your customers.
Well, interestingly, I mean, the state data is kind of a mess, but it looks like sales in Marin and Sonoma County of gas and diesel has been flat for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So this new gas station is going to cannibalize the existing gas stations. Like, the economic case made no sense.
Right.
And the city council just refused to hear it. And then they were beating the drum of the super fancy schmancy double hulled fuel tanks when it doesn't. So let's just, say, sure, the fuel tanks won't leak, and they will leak eventually because that's what they do. But the spillage while filling the tanks and then while filling the car tanks from the pumps, that happens always. And it's just fouling of the environment and it's just, the whole thing is ludicrous, and they were not listening. They were not interested in the conversation.
Yeah.
So, we're suing them under CEQA. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
That's another thing we need to do as activists in California is get better at the whole CEQA process. So that's another whole kettle of fish.
The gas stations are going to have to be forced to evolve, and they will no longer be gas stations. They're going to be charging stations. It's the grid is going to have to be come into play. There's going to be a lot of redesigning, but it will happen. It'll be forced to happen, and it's going to take some time. So, sadly,
Yeah,
enough,
we can't shut down all the gas stations tomorrow. I mean,
no, it's not. It's not going to happen like that. But it's a forced evolution that will happen, and I'm sure it's going to take time, and it's going to take probably some uncomfortable moments. But with activist group like we are, we put the pressure where we can, and sometimes we need marching orders. And I would ask you, you said in your email to Tom, which he's going to send out, is give us 2 very specific things just that we can work on right now. Because
I'd love to. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's what we want.
Okay, good. Yeah, the other one is going to be the Air District Board meeting where they're considering the improved cat cracker filters that keep the emissions from going out. And we thought we were cruising into a win. We thought it was all over, but the shouting basically, and then the fossil fuel industry is now pouring resources, and it's a big fat mess. So we have to show up en masse. That's June 2nd, but I'll put that in the thing. So yes, I will. I'll probably end up with more than 2 specific asks then. And you guys can pick and choose. Yeah, so
Great. Laura, any closing comments?
no, I really appreciate you having me. I'm sorry my computer crashed. Apparently I can't do Zoom and PowerPoint at the same time. That's new.
It could be the same guys that tried to bring down the pipeline on the East Coast.
That's right. The fossil fuel industry is targeting me. They know where I live now. Anyway, so sorry about that. But I think we had a really good conversation anyway. So thank you so much. And I'm really excited to be working with you and then see if we can collaborate a little bit more. I think that'd be great.
So are we. Yeah, I really am as well. We really value you as a part, you as an organization, as a partner. Love having you join us and bring us up to date. And we'll look forward to doing that again, I hope sometime soon. But in the meantime, we'll let's go out and make some calls, show up at some meetings, and get some stuff done.
Sounds good.
Great.
All right.
Thanks
Talk to you
everybody so
later.
much for joining us. Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.